Have you ever had one of those days where nothing seems to go your way? Well, let me tell you about my day. I was gonna make 5 loaves of sourdough using my week-old starter. I started getting all fancy with the flour, added a little whole wheat for flavor and color, some rye for fermentation boost and a little rustic flavor, some semolina flour to add a little sweetness, some balance, and help with a crust texture. Then I was gonna hit you with a slow motion water shot. Cool. At this point, everything was going smoothly. The flour was absorbing the water nicely, creating a nice shaggy dough. With the addition of the wheat flour and rye, it needed a little more water, so we're just adding as needed. At this point, I let this rest on the counter. When I came back about 45 minutes later, there were some good signs of good hydration. Everything looked nice and hydrated, so I went for some assistance to get this next shot. Perfect. This next shot looked better in my mind than it came out in real life, but well, we're rolling with it. I just mixed the dough up a little bit, getting everything nice and incorporated, add a little salt, mix the rest of the way. Everything was promising. For the next 2 hours, we went through a series of stretch and folds, and the dough was behaving normal. Everything was coming out great. Every stretch was gaining more strength and holding its shape a little more. You started seeing little bubbles forming up on top. It was getting less sticky with every fold. I was going by the first loaf that I made with this sour starter, and it took about 8 hours to rise. So I figured I would just leave it overnight and everything would be fine in the morning. The dough was completely relaxed and lost all shape, and when I took it out of the bread bucket, I knew instantly that it had been overproofed. On the bright side, all those little strands show that there was very good gluten development and that my starter is very much active. I started working it in smaller portions. Hope that the lighter weight would help it keep its shape a little more. We could blame the rye at this point and say that it was pushing my starter a little too aggressively and it overproofed. But let's just call it what it is. It was bad time management on my part. Then one last ditch effort, I threw it in the fridge for an hour. See if it would seize enough to allow me to give it a little shape. And that didn't work either. When I stretched and folded and tucked and rolled and did a few spells and nothing helped. So let's make some focaccia. Grab a sheet pan and put a lot of olive oil on it. Now we can just toss in your perfectly fermented sourdough. Stretch it out as far as it can go. Make sure to dimple it nice and deep. Can't really mess it up at this point. You can put anything and everything on a focaccia and it'll taste amazing. I went with some smoky jalapeno and this fancy sea salt. You know, why not? And about 20 to 30 minutes later, we got this. Wasn't the prettiest loaf ever, but it came out nice and soft. The flavor was there, got a nice little crunch on the bottom. There was obviously signs of overproofing on the top. The color was a little uneven. But I'll dip that in some tomato soup and call it a day. But the main thing we learned that my sourdough starter is nice and active and is ready for some high volume production.